I lost my unborn child in prison because of his mistress's lie. He thought he broke me. But on the day of my release, I didn't just walk away. I took everything he had. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, grab a warm cup of tea and get comfortable. I'd love to know what time of day you're watching this video. Please comment M for morning, A for afternoon, or E for evening. Now, let me take you into this story. The heavy iron gate of the Massachusetts State Correctional Facility groaned, a dry, metallic cry that echoed in my bones as it slowly swung open. It revealed a sliver of the bleak, gray sky of late winter. I stepped out, and the biting Boston wind immediately assaulted me. It seeped through the thin, frayed fabric of the coat the release officer had given me, making me shudder violently. 2 years. A stretch of time long enough to transform a vibrant woman in her early 30s, a woman who once commanded boardrooms, into a hollow shell. I was a ghost wandering through the world of the living. I took a deep breath, expecting relief, but there was no sense of freedom. My chest only felt heavy, filled with the damp, desolate scent of prison walls that seemed to cling to my skin like a second layer of grime. I scanned the parking lot. The person waiting for me by the gleaming black luxury sedan was not Grant, the husband who had once promised me the world before personally sending me to this hell. Instead, it was Marcus, his most trusted assistant. The young man, whose face always wore a look of pained sympathy whenever he saw me in the courtroom, quickly extinguished his cigarette and hurried toward me. He reached up to take my tattered duffel bag, then hesitated and pulled his hand back, as if my bad luck might be contagious. Mrs. Sylvia, Marcus lowered his head slightly, his voice trembling with a forced reverence. Mr. Grant had an unexpected board meeting and couldn't make it. He asked me to take you to your new, temporary accommodation. I didn't answer. I didn't even bother to sneer at the timeless excuse. I simply stared at him with eyes that had forgotten how to cry. Marcus fumbled in his pocket and pulled out a keycard and a thick envelope. "This is for a studio apartment in the South End," he stammered. "And a debit card with a small allowance." Grant said, "He said it's a gesture to help you get back on your feet." He thinks the sentence was a bit harsh, looking back. A bit harsh. I stared at the items in his hand. The plastic reflected the dull winter light. Was he using money to buy a clear conscience? Or was he using this to silence a woman fresh out of prison? I didn't take them. I walked past Marcus, my boots crunching on the dirty snow, heading toward the bus stop. "Mrs. Sylvia, wait." Marcus called out, but I kept walking. Suddenly, a sleek silver Bentley screeched to a halt right in front of me, blocking my path. The window rolled down, and a blast of warm, expensive cologne hit me, mixing with the smell of exhaust. It was a scent that used to make my heart flutter. Now, it made my stomach churn. Grant sat there. He looked impeccable in a tailored charcoal suit, his hair perfectly coiffed. He hadn't aged a day. If anything, he looked more prosperous, fed on the blood and tears of my suffering. He looked at me, scanning my gaunt face and the rough, chapped skin of my hands. There was no pity in his eyes, only a cold calculation. "Get in," he commanded. It wasn't an offer. "I'd rather freeze," I rasped. My voice was rusty from disuse. Grant chuckled, a low, menacing sound. He reached into the passenger seat and held up a thick file folder. He tossed it out the window. It landed in the slush at my feet. The cover fell open, revealing a zoning map. A bright red line was drawn right through a familiar plot of land in the outskirts of the city. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew that map. I knew that plot. It was the old community cemetery where my grandmother was buried. "Recognize this?" Grant asked, lighting a cigar. "My new resort project. The blueprints just got approved this morning. The main swimming pool is slated to go right where your grandmother is sleeping." I froze. My grandmother. She was my only family, my reason for living, my entire world before she passed. I was in prison when she died, unable to even attend her funeral. It was the greatest pain of my life, a wound that never scabbed over. You wouldn't, I whispered, looking up at him. I would, Grant smiled, a shark baring its teeth. Unless. Unless what? Unless you come back to work. I need someone to handle the archive and the cleaning at the estate. The new maids are incompetent. Sign a 5-year employment contract. You work off your debt to me, the legal fees, the divorce settlement you owe. In exchange, I'll reroute the pool. I'll leave the old lady alone. He was holding my grandmother's soul hostage. Rage, hot and blinding, surged through me, but I clamped it down. 2 years in prison taught me one thing: never show your cards. I looked at the map, then at Grant. Fine, I said, my voice dead calm. I'll do it. Grant smirked, thinking he had won. He thought he was bringing home a beaten dog. He had no idea he was inviting a wolf into his den. Thank you so much for watching. If you are listening to this right now, please take a moment to like this video and comment the number 1 below. It lets me know you are here with me, supporting me through this journey. Your support means the world to me. Please comment 1 so I can see you. Now, let me tell you how this all began. To understand why I agreed to become a servant in my own house, you have to understand who we were 3 years ago. Back then, Grant wasn't the tycoon he is today. He was charming, yes. Handsome, absolutely. But he was terrified of numbers. He couldn't read a contract to save his life. I was the brain. I was the one with the MBA from Harvard, the one who stayed up until 3 a.m. drafting proposals, analyzing risk, and securing loans. Grant was the face. He shook the hands, cut the ribbons, and took the credit. And for a long time, I was okay with that. I loved him. I wanted him to shine. I thought we were partners. But insecurity is a dangerous thing in a man. The more successful we became, the more Grant resented me. He hated that the bankers asked for my opinion during meetings. He hated that the lawyers directed their questions to me. Then came Krystal. She was everything I wasn't. She was a former runway model, 23 years old, with legs that went on for days and a voice that sounded like spun sugar. She didn't know the difference between a stock and a bond, and that made Grant feel powerful. He hired her as a consultant, but everyone in the office knew what that meant. I tried to ignore it. I tried to focus on the business, on our marriage. I thought it was just a phase. I was so foolish. The incident happened on a Tuesday. I remember it because it was raining. Krystal had come to our house to drop off some papers. We were at the top of the stairs. She was wearing a tight dress that showed off a slight bump in her belly. She had announced she was pregnant with Grant's child a week prior. That news had shattered me, but I maintained my dignity. You need to leave, I had told her calmly. Grant isn't home. Krystal had laughed. He's leaving you, Sylvia. He told me. He says you're cold. Boring. He wants a real woman. Get out, I pointed to the door. Krystal took a step back. Then, her eyes shifted to the front door. She saw the handle turning. Grant was coming home early. In a split second, her expression changed from arrogance to terror. She let out a piercing scream. No, Sylvia. Don't. And then, she threw herself backward. It was like watching a slow-motion horror movie. She flung herself down the stairs, her body tumbling, hitting the steps with sickening thuds. She landed at the bottom just as Grant walked in. Krystal! Grant roared, rushing to her. She lay there, sobbing, clutching her stomach. She pushed me, Grant. She said she wanted to kill our baby. I stood at the top of the stairs, paralyzed. No, I whispered. I didn't touch her. But Grant looked up at me, and the hatred in his eyes turned my blood to ice. He didn't ask for my side. He didn't look for evidence. He saw an opportunity. An opportunity to get rid of the wife who made him feel inferior and replace her with the woman who worshipped him. The court case was a nightmare. Grant took the stand. I watched my husband, the man I had built a life with, place his hand on the Bible and look the jury in the eye. I saw it, Grant said, his voice steady. I walked in and saw Sylvia shove her. She was jealous. She was angry. My lawyer tried to fight it, but the testimony of a distraught husband and a grieving mother was too powerful. Krystal claimed she had a miscarriage due to the fall. She produced medical records, photos of a bloody hospital bed. The jury looked at me like I was a monster. I was convicted of aggravated assault and causing the termination of a pregnancy. The judge wanted to make an example of me. 2 years. As the bailiff led me away in handcuffs, I looked back. Grant was holding Krystal, comforting her. But over his shoulder, Krystal looked at me. She stopped crying instantly. She winked. That wink haunted me every single night for 730 days. But it wasn't the worst thing that happened to me. The worst thing happened a month later, inside the prison walls. Prison is loud. That's the first thing you learn. It's a constant cacophony of metal slamming, women screaming, and the buzz of fluorescent lights that never truly go dark. But the silence inside my own body was deafening. I had been in the facility for about 3 weeks when the sickness started. I thought it was the food, the gray, tasteless slop they served us on plastic trays. I was vomiting every morning. I felt dizzy, weak. I tried to go to the infirmary, but the guards dismissed it. "You're just adjusting, princess," one of them sneered. "Get back to work." But I knew my body. I counted the days. My period was late. Very late. The realization hit me while I was scrubbing the floor of the cafeteria. I was pregnant. Before the trial, before the chaos, Grant and I had been trying. Or rather, I had been trying. It must have happened right before the incident on the stairs. I was carrying Grant's child. The irony was so sharp it felt like a physical blow. He had jailed me for killing a baby that didn't exist, while his real child was growing inside the woman he imprisoned. I decided to keep it a secret. I couldn't let them know. If Grant found out, he would take the baby away. He would claim I was unfit. I planned to wait until I could see a lawyer, someone who wasn't on Grant's payroll. But secrets are hard to keep in a cage. There was a woman in my cell block, a towering figure named Big T. She ran the laundry duty. One afternoon, she cornered me in the showers. There were 2 other women with her. They didn't ask for my commissary or my shoes. "The new Mrs. Grant sends her regards," Big T said. My blood ran cold. Krystal. She had reached me even in here. They didn't just beat me. They destroyed me. It was calculated. Precise. They aimed for my stomach. I curled into a ball, screaming, begging, protecting the tiny flicker of life inside me with my hands, but their boots were heavy and relentless. "Please!" I shrieked, the water from the shower mixing with the tears on my face. "I'm pregnant. Please don't." That only made them kick harder. When the guards finally came, the women scattered. I was left lying on the wet tiles, gasping for air. But the physical pain of the bruises was nothing compared to the sharp, cramping agony that started in my lower abdomen an hour later. I was thrown into solitary confinement for starting a fight. No doctor. No nurse. Just a cold, dark concrete box. That night, alone in the dark, I lost him. I knew it was a boy. I don't know how, but a mother knows. I bled onto the thin, scratchy mattress. I curled up, shivering, sobbing silently so the guards wouldn't hear. I held the bloody clumps of tissue and a ragged piece of cloth I had torn from my uniform. It was my baby. My son. There was no funeral. No burial. The next morning, when they let me out to use the toilet, I had to flush the remains of my child away. It was the most dehumanizing, soul-crushing moment of my existence. I felt a part of my soul detach and float away, leaving behind a cold, hard void. I returned to my cell a different person. Sylvia, the hopeful wife, the brilliant businesswoman, died on that solitary confinement floor. A few days later, I realized my necklace was gone. It was a simple silver locket my grandmother had given me, the only thing I had been allowed to keep because of a religious exemption. Inside was a picture of her. Big T had ripped it off my neck during the assault. I confronted her in the yard a week later. I didn't care that she was twice my size. I didn't care if I died. I walked up to her and demanded it back. She laughed and spat at my feet. That piece of trash? I flushed it. Just like your kid. Something snapped. I didn't see a human being in front of me. I saw a demon. I lunged. I fought with the ferocity of a mother who had nothing left to lose. I bit her ear, tearing flesh, screaming like a banshee until the guards tossed me. They put me in the hole for a month. Darkness. Silence. I sat there, rocking back and forth. I stopped crying. I stopped feeling fear. I started plotting. Grant thought he had won. Krystal thought she was safe. But they had made a fatal mistake. They hadn't broken me. They had forged me into steel. The iron gates of the estate swung open, but this time, I wasn't sitting in the passenger seat of a Bentley. I was in the back of a delivery van, sitting on a pile of dirty drop cloths. Grant had arranged for a service vehicle to bring me in, ensuring the neighbors wouldn't see his ex-wife returning in a luxury car. The house loomed ahead. It was a sprawling Georgian manor that I had designed myself. I had picked out the brick, the imported slate for the roof, the Japanese maples lining the driveway. Now, it looked like a fortress I had to infiltrate. Mrs. Davis, the head housekeeper, met me at the service entrance. She was a kind, elderly woman who had been with us for years. When she saw me, her hands flew to her mouth. "Oh, Miss Sylvia," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "My God, look at you." "It's okay, Mrs. Davis," I said softly, though my voice sounded foreign even to my own ears. "I'm just here to work." "Mr. Grant, he said you're to stay in the basement," she said, looking down at her shoes in shame. "The old storage room next to the wine cellar. He said you're not allowed on the upper floors unless summoned." "I understand." I walked down the narrow wooden stairs to the basement. The air grew colder, damper. The room was small, filled with cardboard boxes and old furniture covered in dust sheets. There was a single cot pushed against the wall, a thin pillow, and a scratchy blanket that smelled of mothballs. No windows. Just a flickering bulb overhead. This was my new home. The mistress of the manor had become the cellar rat. I set my duffel bag down. My body ached from the tension, but my mind was racing. Grant had made a mistake bringing me here. He thought humiliating me would satisfy his ego. He didn't realize he had just given me access to the belly of the beast. That first night, I waited until the house was silent. I could hear the faint thud of footsteps upstairs, Grant and Krystal. I imagined them in the master bedroom, my bedroom, sleeping in the bed I had chosen. The anger simmered, low and hot. I crept out of my room and moved silently through the dark hallway toward the server closet. This house was smart. I knew because I had insisted on the latest automation technology. Lighting, security, heating, everything was controlled by a central server. I reached the panel and punched in a code, 1-9-4-5. My grandmother's birth year. The light on the panel blinked red. Access denied. I paused. Of course. Grant might be lazy, but he wasn't completely stupid. He must have changed it. I tried his birthday. Denied. Krystal's birthday, which I knew from the court documents. Denied. I closed my eyes and thought like Grant. What did he value most? Himself? Money? No. He valued the date he won. The date of the trial verdict. I punched in the numbers. 0-3-1-2. The light blinked green. Access granted. I almost laughed out loud. His arrogance was so predictable. I quickly accessed the security camera feed. The small screen on the wall flickered to life, showing a grid of views from all over the house and the grounds. I tapped on the camera for the living room. It was empty. I tapped on the camera for the home office. My breath caught in my throat. Grant was there, sitting at his desk. He wasn't working. He was holding a glass of whiskey, staring at a portrait on the wall. It was a painting of Krystal, looking regal and fake. But Grant didn't look happy. He looked tired. He rubbed his temples, opened a drawer, and pulled out a bottle of pills. He shook 2 out and swallowed them with the whiskey. Stress? Anxiety? Then, he opened a different drawer, a locked one at the bottom of the desk. He pulled out a thick red ledger. He opened it, stared at the pages, and slammed it shut, burying his face in his hands. That ledger. I remembered it. That was the unofficial book. The one we used to track cash payments that didn't need to be taxed immediately. But we had stopped using it years ago when the company went public. Why was he using it now? I watched him for an hour until he staggered out of the room. Knowledge is power, I whispered to myself in the darkness. I wasn't just a housekeeper. I was a spy. And the walls of this house were about to start talking to me. 2 days later, the peace of the morning was shattered by a screeching voice echoing from the foyer. Where is she? Where is that jailbird? I was polishing the mahogany banister on the grand staircase. I froze. I knew that voice. It was Eleanor, Grant's mother. A woman who believed that Chanel suits and pearls could cover up a rotting soul. She had never liked me. I came from a modest background, I worked for a living. To her, I was common. Krystal, with her fake pedigree and sycophantic flattery, was the daughter-in-law she had always wanted. I walked down the stairs, keeping my head lowered, clutching my cleaning rag. Eleanor stood in the center of the hallway, looking like a peacock in a bright blue dress. Krystal was next to her, smirking. There she is, Krystal pointed a manicured finger at me. The new help. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. She marched up to me, the heels of her shoes clicking sharply on the marble floor. She stopped inches from my face. She smelled of heavy floral perfume and old gin. You have some nerve coming back here, Eleanor spat. After what you did to my son? To my grandchild? I'm just doing my job, Mrs. Caldwell, I said quietly. Job? She scoffed. You're here to beg. You're here to leech off Grant again. I told him he should have let you rot in the street. She looked down at my hands, rough and scarred from prison labor. She sneered. Look at you. Disgusting. You look like a drug addict. She happened to be holding a cup of takeout coffee. Without warning, she tilted her wrist. The hot, brown liquid splashed over the front of my gray uniform, soaking into the fabric and scalding my skin. I gasped and took a step back. Oops, Eleanor said, her face devoid of apology. Clumsy me. Well, don't just stand there. Clean it up. And while you're down there, my shoes got splashed. Clean them too. She pointed to her expensive Italian leather pumps. Krystal giggled. Go on, Sylvia. You're good at scrubbing, right? My hand gripped the rag so hard my knuckles turned white. The old Sylvia would have cried. The old Sylvia would have run away. But the wolf inside me growled. I slowly knelt. I wiped the coffee from the floor. Then, I moved to Eleanor's shoes. I dabbed at the leather carefully. Eleanor looked down at me with a triumphant smile, enjoying her power trip. I finished one shoe. Then the other. I stood up slowly, looking her dead in the eye. I stepped closer, invading her personal space. Thank you, Mrs. Caldwell, I said, my voice barely a whisper, just for her. By the way, how is the Children's Hope Charity Fund doing? Eleanor froze. Her smile vanished. What are you talking about? I leaned in, my lips brushing her ear. The $50,000 you withdrew last year. The administrative expenses that coincidentally happened the same week you got that facelift in Brazil. I still have the bank statements from the old server backup. Does Grant know you're stealing from his tax shelter? Eleanor's face went from pale to a sickly shade of gray. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She took a stumbling step back, nearly tripping over her own feet. You. She stammered. I'd hate for the IRS to see those receipts, I added pleasantly, loud enough for Krystal to hear the tone, but not the words. Is there anything else you need cleaned, ma'am? Eleanor looked at me with pure terror. She clutched her purse to her chest. I have a headache, she announced abruptly, her voice shrill. Krystal, I'm leaving. I can't be in this house with this air. She turned and practically ran out the door, forgetting all her usual poise. Krystal looked confused. Eleanor? Wait! What happened? She glared at me. What did you say to her? I looked at the coffee stain on my chest. It burned, but the satisfaction in my heart felt cool and soothing. I just asked about her health, I said flatly. I should go change. I walked away, leaving Krystal standing there, bewildered. 1 down. 2 to go. Life in the house settled into a grotesque routine. I was the invisible ghost, scrubbing floors and dusting shelves while Krystal played the lady of the manor. But Krystal wasn't just lazy, she was cruel. It wasn't enough that I was doing the work, she wanted to make it as hard as possible. The washing machine ruins the silk, she claimed one morning, throwing a pile of intricate lace lingerie and evening gowns at me. Wash these by hand. And use cold water. I don't want them shrinking. So, I spent hours in the laundry room, my hands submerged in freezing water, scrubbing her stains. My knuckles cracked and bled, the soap stinging the open sores. But this task gave me access to something valuable, her trash. Grant was obsessed with having an heir. At dinner, while I served them roast chicken like a waitress, I would hear him talking about it. The doctor says we should keep trying, Grant would say, reaching for her hand. Maybe we should look into IVF if it doesn't happen this month. Krystal would sigh dramatically, looking fragile. I know, darling. I want it so much too. But ever since the accident. She would cast a meaningful, accusatory glance at me standing in the corner. My body is just so weak. I get so dizzy. Take your time, my love, Grant would soothe her. We'll get there. It was a touching performance. Truly Oscar-worthy. One Tuesday, I was cleaning Krystal's private bathroom. It was a mess of expensive cosmetics, hair tools, and discarded clothes. She was a slob. I was emptying the small chrome trash can under the sink when something caught my eye. Usually, Krystal was careful. But she had been drinking heavily the night before. I had found 3 empty wine bottles in the recycling. Alcohol makes people sloppy. Buried under a pile of makeup wipes and cotton balls was a small, silver blister pack. It was empty. I picked it up. Levonorgestrel. I knew that name. It was emergency contraception. The Plan B pill. I frowned. If they were desperately trying to have a baby, why would she be taking this? I dug deeper. Wrapped inside a tissue at the very bottom was another packet. This one was a regular monthly birth control pack. Several pills were popped out. I stood up, clutching the foil packets. My heart raced. Krystal wasn't weak or traumatized. She was actively preventing a pregnancy. She was lying to Grant every single day. Why? Grant was rich. A baby would cement her status, guarantee her a massive child support check if they divorced. It didn't make sense for a gold digger to avoid the gold anchor. Unless she couldn't have a baby. Unless the pills were just a failsafe, a way to keep up the charade of trying while ensuring no accidents happened that would reveal a deeper medical truth. Or maybe she just despised the idea of ruining her model figure. Whatever the reason, this was ammunition. I took my phone, a cheap, prepaid smartphone I had bought with the cash Marcus gave me, and snapped photos of the pill packets. Then I carefully put them back exactly as I found them. That evening, the dynamic at the dinner table felt different to me. I watched Krystal pretending to swoon. I feel a bit nauseous today, she murmured, touching her stomach. Maybe. Grant's face lit up with hope. Really? I don't want to jinx it, she smiled shyly. I was pouring water into Grant's glass. I looked at Krystal. Our eyes met. For a second, I saw the panic behind her mask. She knew I was the one who cleaned her bathroom. She must have realized she left the trash. Her eyes flicked to the bathroom door, then back to me. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just poured the water, steady and calm. Is there anything else you need, Miss Krystal? I asked. No, she snapped, her voice shrill. Get out. I walked back to the kitchen, the image of those pills burned into my mind. She was playing a dangerous game. And I was keeping score. I needed help. Information was useless if I couldn't use it legally. I needed a lawyer, but not just any lawyer. I needed someone who knew where the bodies were buried, literally and figuratively. Mr. Henderson was my father's old friend. He had handled my grandmother's estate. He was retired now, pushed out of his own firm by the new generation of sharks that Grant preferred. But I knew he still had his license. Sneaking out of the estate was easier than breaking into a prison. The security code I had stolen worked on the side gate too. I waited until 2 a.m. when the house was dead silent and slipped out wearing a black hoodie and jeans. I walked 3 miles to the nearest 24-hour diner on the highway, where I had arranged to meet him. Mr. Henderson was sitting in a booth, looking frail but sharp-eyed. He had a pile of documents in front of him and a cup of black coffee. Sylvia, he breathed when he saw me. He stood up and hugged me. It was the first genuine hug I had received in years. I almost broke down right there in the smell of bacon grease and old leather. Sit, child, he said. We don't have much time. Did you find it? I asked, my hands trembling. I did. He slid a thick document across the table. Your grandmother was a wise woman, Sylvia. She didn't trust Grant. She saw how he looked at your inheritance. I opened the folder. It was a property deed. Before she passed, Henderson explained, she executed a quitclaim deed. She transferred the title of the cemetery land, the entire 50 acres, to a trust. A trust? The Eternal Peace Trust. And guess who the sole beneficiary and trustee is? I looked at the name on the paper. Sylvia Sterling. Me? You. But here is the kicker, Henderson tapped the paper with a gnarled finger. The deed has a clause. The transfer of control was triggered effectively upon your release from incarceration. Until then, the land was in a legal limbo, appearing to be part of the general estate that Grant manages as executor. So Grant thinks he owns it? He thinks he controls it as the executor of her will. But this deed supersedes the will because the transfer happened inter vivos, while she was alive. He just didn't look hard enough at the county clerk's older records. He saw what he wanted to see. I stared at the paper. So, the mortgage he took out? The loans for the resort? Henderson grinned, showing coffee-stained teeth. Fraud. All of it. He pledged collateral he didn't own. He signed legal documents claiming ownership of land that belongs to you. My mind raced. This wasn't just leverage. This was a nuclear bomb. If I enforce this now, I said slowly, I can stop the construction. You can do more than that, Henderson lowered his voice. If Grant has already drawn down on the construction loans, which I hear he has, heavily, and the bank finds out the collateral is void, they will call the loan immediately. He'll be insolvent within 24 hours. And since he signed affidavits of ownership, that's bank fraud. Federal prison time. I leaned back against the vinyl booth. The waitress poured me more coffee, unaware that two people were discussing the destruction of a multi-millionaire empire. But we have to be careful, Henderson warned. If he finds out you know, he'll try to destroy the evidence or coerce you into signing the land over. He needs that land, Sylvia. He's over-leveraged. I asked around. He owes money to some, less than reputable private lenders. Loan sharks? Sophisticated ones. But yes. If this project fails, he's not just broke. He's dead. A chill went down my spine, followed by a rush of adrenaline. I need you to prepare the paperwork, I said. But don't file it yet. I need him to dig the hole deeper. I need him to spend every last cent he has starting the construction. That's a dangerous game, Sylvia. I know. I looked at the dark window, seeing my own reflection. But he stole 2 years of my life. I'm going to take everything he has. I took the copy of the deed, folded it, and hid it inside my shirt, against my skin. It felt warmer than any fire. I had the weapon. Now, I just needed the right moment to pull the trigger. December arrived, bringing with it the company's annual charity gala. It was the social event of the season, a night of champagne, diamonds, and fake smiles. Grant came down to the basement 3 days before the event. He threw a garment bag onto my cot. "You're coming," he said curtly. "Excuse me?" I looked up from the book I was reading. The rumors are starting to spread. People are whispering that I'm keeping you locked up like a prisoner. It's bad for the stock price. I need you to make an appearance. Show everyone we're amicable. That I'm helping you rehabilitate. I'm a janitor, Grant. I don't belong there. You'll go, he hissed. Or the excavators start digging up your grandmother tomorrow morning. The threat again. He loved that card. He didn't know it was a joker, and I held the ace. "Fine," I said. I unzipped the bag. It was a dress. A stunning, floor-length gown made of blood-red silk. It was backless. Completely backless, dipping low to the waist. I stared at it. "I can't wear this." "Why?" "It's your size." Krystal picked it out. She said red suits you. Krystal. Of course. She knew. She wanted to humiliate me. She wanted to expose me. "Grant, look at the cut," I said, my voice tight. "It's backless." "So?" "You used to have a great back." "Put it on." He turned and left before I could argue. The night of the gala, I stood in front of the small, cracked mirror in the basement. I pulled the silk up. It slid over my skin like water. I turned around to look at my reflection. My back was a roadmap of pain. Thick, raised keloid scars crisscrossed my skin, the legacy of the beatings, of being thrown against metal bunks, of the belt Big T had used. They were ugly. Violent. Purple and white ridges on pale skin. If I walked into that ballroom, everyone would see. Everyone would know I was damaged goods. But then, I looked at my eyes in the mirror. Krystal wanted me to be ashamed. She wanted me to cower and refuse to take off my coat. She wanted me to look weak. No. I swept my hair up into a high, severe bun. I applied the red lipstick I had bought at the drugstore. I stood tall. Let them look. Let them see what their golden boy Grant had done to his wife. These weren't scars. They were war paint. When I arrived at the hotel ballroom, the air was thick with perfume and jazz music. Grant was at the center of the room, holding court with a glass of champagne, Krystal clinging to his arm in glittering gold. I walked in. The silence spread like a wave. It started at the door and rolled across the room until the band actually stopped playing for a beat. I kept my head high. I walked straight through the crowd. The red dress flowed around me. And as I passed, I heard the gasps. "Oh my God," a woman whispered. "Look at her back." "Is that? Did he do that?" I heard she was in prison, but that looks like torture. Grant turned around, smiling, expecting to see me cowering in a corner. Instead, he saw me standing under the chandelier, the center of attention. He saw the guests staring at my back with horror and pity. He saw the investors whispering, looking at him with suspicion. He went pale. He hadn't realized. He had never actually looked at my body since I returned. He had no idea how bad the scars were. He rushed over to me, grabbing my arm, his grip bruising. "What do you think you're doing?" he hissed through a fake smile. "Put a shawl on." "You're disgusting." "You chose the dress, Grant," I said loud enough for the nearby senator's wife to hear. "I'm just following orders." I pulled my arm away. "Don't touch me. It hurts where the scars are." Grant recoiled as if burned. The senator's wife looked at him with open disgust. Krystal appeared, her eyes wide. She had expected me to look trashy. Instead, I looked like a tragic queen, and she looked like the cheap glitter next to a diamond. "You're ruining the party," Krystal whispered venomously. "The party was ruined the moment you two walked in," I replied calmly. I walked over to the bar and ordered a sparkling water. I felt their eyes on me. I had turned their weapon against them. I wasn't hiding my pain anymore. I was wearing it. And for the first time, Grant looked afraid. He realized he couldn't control the narrative anymore. The monster he created was out of the cage. The bathroom was a sanctuary of marble and gold, a stark contrast to the rusty, communal showers I had used for the past 2 years. But the air here felt just as suffocating. I gripped the edge of the sink, staring at my reflection. The red dress was a second skin, exposing every ridge of scar tissue on my back, but my face was a mask of stone. The lock on the door clicked. I didn't turn around. I knew who it was. The scent of Chanel No. 5 mixed with the sour tang of too much champagne filled the small room. "You think you're clever, don't you?" Krystal's voice slurred slightly. I watched her in the mirror. She was leaning against the door, blocking my exit. Her golden dress shimmered, but her eyes were dark with malice. She looked at my back, her lip curling in disgust. "You look like a monster," she spat. "Grant was almost sick looking at you." "Grant created this monster," I said calmly, turning to face her. "And you helped holding the chisel." Krystal laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. She stumbled forward, waving her champagne flute. "Oh, stop playing the victim, Sylvia. It's pathetic. You lost. You're a convict. A barren, broken convict washing my underwear. Is that why you're trembling, Krystal?" I took a step toward her. "Because you won? Or because you're terrified that Grant is starting to see through the cracks?" "Grant worships me," she shrieked, her composure slipping. "He's going to build me a resort. He's going to give me everything you built, but bigger." "And the baby?" I asked softly. "When are you going to give him the air he wants? Or are you going to keep taking those pills I found in your trash?" Krystal froze. The color drained from her face, leaving her rouge standing out like clown paint. You went through my things?" "I clean your trash, Krystal. I see everything. I know you're not trying. I know you can't satisfy him. It was a gamble." I pushed the button of her insecurity. And because she was drunk, because she was arrogant, and because she thought I was nobody, a powerless ex-con with no friends and no phone, she took the bait. She stepped closer, invading my space, her breath hot and boozy on my face. "You think Grant cares? You think he wants a brat running around ruining my body? He loves me. He loved his unborn child too," I whispered. "The one you claimed I killed." Krystal rolled her eyes, a gesture so dismissive it made my blood boil. "Oh, please. That was the easiest performance of my life. Grant is such a gullible idiot. All it took was a little stumble." "And the blood?" I pressed, my hand subtly checking the pocket of my dress where the phone was recording. "The doctors?" "Pig blood, honey," she sneered, leaning in as if sharing a dirty little secret between girlfriends. "From the butcher shop on Main Street. A little bladder hidden under my dress." Pop splash. Scream. It was theatrical genius. "And Dr. Eris? He has a gambling debt that Grant could pay off in a heartbeat. He signed whatever I put in front of him." My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought she might hear it. She had said it. She had admitted it. "There was no baby," I said, my voice shaking with genuine rage now. "You sent me to prison, you destroyed my life, for a lie?" "I sent you to prison because you were in my way." Krystal poked a sharp fingernail into my chest. "And guess what? You're still in my way. So be a good little maid. Keep your mouth shut about the pills, or I'll tell Grant you stole from him. Who do you think he'll believe? The mother of his future children, or the psycho who attacked a pregnant woman?" She finished her champagne in one gulp, burped ungracefully, and turned to the mirror to fix her lipstick. "Fix your back, Sylvia," she said to my reflection. "It's making people lose their appetite." She unlocked the door and swayed out, leaving me alone in the silence. I waited 5 seconds. Then, I pulled the phone out of my pocket. I hit stop recording. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the kill. I replayed the last minute, holding the speaker to my ear. "Pig blood, honey, theatrical genius. Dr. Eris has a gambling debt." It was crystal clear. Her voice, arrogant and undeniable. I looked at myself in the mirror one last time. A single tear tracked through the powder on my cheek. I wiped it away aggressively. That was the last tear I would shed for the past. I had the smoking gun. Now, I just needed to aim it at the right moment. The days following the gala were tense. The atmosphere in the house was like the air before a thunderstorm, heavy, static, and suffocating. Grant was moody. The reaction to my appearance at the gala hadn't been the PR win he wanted. Instead of looking benevolent, he looked like a brute. Investors were calling, asking uncomfortable questions about his domestic situation. I stayed in the shadows, doing my work, but I was watching. Grant began to watch Krystal too. I noticed his eyes lingering on her when she complained of her delicate condition. He wasn't looking with concern anymore, he was looking with calculation. The seed of doubt I had planted, simply by existing, by surviving, was taking root. One afternoon, I was in the library, organizing the chaotic mess of invoices Grant called a filing system. The door creaked open. I expected Grant to come in and bark orders. Instead, it was Marcus. He closed the door softly behind him and locked it. I stood up, gripping a heavy ledger defensively. "What do you want, Marcus?" He looked tired. Dark circles rimmed his eyes, and his tie was loosened. He held up a hands. "Peace, Mrs. Sylvia. Please. I brought you something." He walked over to the desk and placed a USB drive and a stack of papers on the mahogany surface. "What is this?" "The real books," Marcus whispered. "Not the ones Grant shows the bank. The ones he keeps on the encrypted drive." I looked at him, surprised. Marcus had been Grant's shadow for 5 years. He was the one who drove the car, who held the umbrella, who looked the other way. "Why?" I asked. Marcus looked down at his shoes. "The night of the gala, when I saw your back." He swallowed hard, his voice cracking. "I have a sister, Mrs. Sylvia. She was in an abusive relationship. I saw the marks on you, and I realized." He looked up, his eyes wet. "I realized I've been helping a monster. I knew he was ruthless in business. I knew he was cheating on you. But I didn't know. I didn't know about the prison. I didn't know he let you get hurt like that." "He didn't hold the whip, Marcus," I said coldly. "But he locked the door." "I know," Marcus nodded. "And I held the keys. I can't undo it. But I can help you bury him." He opened the file. "The resort project? He's completely underwater. He's moved money from the employee pension fund to cover the initial zoning fees. He's taken loans from the Graybridge Group. The loan sharks? Worse. They're a front for the cartel money laundering. If he doesn't break ground on that cemetery land in 3 days and show proof of ownership to release the next tranche of funding, they will break his legs. Literally." I looked at the numbers. It was worse than I thought. Grant wasn't just broke, he was criminally liable. He was robbing Peter to pay Paul, and Paul was holding a gun. "He needs the land deed," I murmured. "He needs to show the bank he owns the collateral." "Exactly," Marcus said. "He's going to forge your grandmother's signature again on an updated affidavit tomorrow. He's meeting the lenders at 10 a.m. I looked at Marcus. "Can you get me into that meeting?" "He'll never allow it." "Not as Sylvia, the maid," I said, a plan forming in my mind. "As the representative of the Eternal Peace Trust. Marcus looked confused. "The what?" "The legal entity that actually owns the land," I smiled, a cold, sharp smile. "Mr. Henderson set it up. Grant thinks he's dealing with a nameless trustee. He doesn't know the trustee is me. I need you to tell him the trust is sending a representative to sign off on the easement rights he needs." Marcus stared at me for a long moment, then a slow grin spread across his face. "He's desperate. He'll take the meeting. He thinks he can bully anyone into signing." "Good," I said. "Then let's set the stage." Marcus turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Sylvia? I am sorry. Truly." "Make it up to me tomorrow, Marcus," I said. "Make sure the coffee is hot. I hate negotiating on an empty stomach." After he left, I sat in the leather chair that used to be mine. I scrolled through the files Marcus gave me. Pension theft. Tax evasion. Wire fraud. Grant had been busy. I looked at the security monitor. Grant was in the garden, arguing with Krystal. She was pouting, trying to hug him, but he pushed her away. The cracks were widening into canyons. Everything was falling into place. Tomorrow, Grant would sign his life away. And he would do it looking right at me, without even seeing me. The conference room of Caldwell Enterprises was exactly as I remembered it, glass walls overlooking the Boston skyline, plush leather chairs, and the smell of fear masked by expensive espresso. But today, the fear was palpable. Grant sat at the head of the table. He was sweating. His suit was impeccable, but his hands shook slightly as he adjusted his cufflinks. Opposite him sat 3 men from the Graybridge group. They didn't look like bankers. They wore suits that were a little too shiny, watches that were a little too big, and their eyes were dead sharks swimming in a sea of greed. I waited in the anteroom. I wasn't wearing my maid's uniform. I wasn't wearing the rags from prison. I was wearing a charcoal gray power suit I had asked Marcus to retrieve from my old storage unit, one of the few things Grant hadn't thrown away. I wore oversized dark sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat, concealing most of my face. To Grant, I would just look like another faceless lawyer. Marcus opened the door. "Mr. Caldwell? The representative from the Eternal Peace Trust is here." Grant looked up, relief washing over his face. "Finally. Send them in." I walked in. My heels clicked on the floor with a rhythmic, authoritative cadence. I didn't look at Grant. I sat at the far end of the table, placing my briefcase down. "MS?" Grant asked, squinting at me. "Miss Sterling," I said, pitching my voice lower, raspier. It wasn't hard, my vocal cords were still damaged from the screaming in solitary. Grant didn't recognize the voice. He didn't recognize the name. Sterling was my grandmother's maiden name, one I hadn't used in a decade. "Miss Sterling," Grant put on his charming smile. "Thank you for coming. As you know, we need the trust to sign off on the boundary adjustments so we can proceed with the excavation." The lead loan shark, a man named Mr. Vane, leaned forward. "We need to see clear title, Grant." "No title, no money." "And if there's no money?" He let the threat hang in the air. Of course, Grant stammered. He slid a document toward me. "This just confirms that the trust acknowledges my executorship and approves the development." Standard formality. I picked up the pen. I looked at the document. It was a lie. A beautifully drafted, legal-sounding lie. By signing this, the trust would effectively dissolve its claim, handing the land to Grant. But underneath that document, inside my briefcase, was the real paperwork. The paperwork that Marcus had swapped into the pile Grant was about to sign for the loan sharks. "The trust is willing to cooperate," I said slowly. "Provided the financing is secure. We don't want a half-finished hole in the ground next to the graves." "The financing is secure," Grant insisted, looking at Mr. Vane. "Right here. I just need to sign the loan agreement." "Then sign," Mr. Vane said. Grant grabbed his pen. He was so eager, so desperate. He didn't read the fine print of the loan agreement Marcus had placed in front of him. If he had, he would have seen the clause I added: "Borrower certifies under penalty of perjury that he holds sole, unencumbered fee simple title to the collateral." Since he didn't own the land, I did. Signing that document was an immediate act of criminal fraud. Grant scribbled his signature. Grant Caldwell. He looked up, triumphant. "Done. Now, Miss Sterling, your turn." I picked up my pen. I signed the document he gave me. But I didn't sign Sylvia Sterling. I signed an illegible scrawl. "Excellent." Grant stood up, clapping his hands. "Mr. Vane, the land is ours. Transfer the funds." Mr. Vane nodded to his associate, who began typing on a laptop. Funds released. $50 million. Interest rate starts ticking now, Grant. Don't be late. The shark stood up and left. Grant collapsed into his chair, laughing. I did it. I saved it. He looked at me. Thank you, Ms. Sterling. You can go now. I stood up. I reached up and slowly took off my hat. Then, I removed the dark sunglasses. Grant was pouring himself a scotch. He froze. The glass hovered halfway to his mouth. He blinked, as if hallucinating. Sylvia, he whispered. Hello, Grant, I said, my voice returning to its normal, icy clarity. What are you doing here? Why are you wearing that? He looked at the door where the loan sharks had exited, then back at me. You're the representative? I am the trust, Grant, I said. Grandma left the land to me. Not to the estate. To me. Directly. Grant's face went white. No. That's impossible. I'm the executor. Check the county records from 1999, I smiled. Or check the deed I just gave your loan sharks. What did you do? He scrambled for the papers on the table. You just borrowed $50 million using collateral you don't own, I explained calmly, as if teaching a child. You just committed bank fraud in front of 3 witnesses. And since you don't own the land, you can't build the resort. Which means you can't pay them back. You signed. He held up the paper I had signed. You approved it. Look at the signature, Grant. He looked down. It wasn't a signature. It was a drawing. A crude, simple drawing of a prison cell. That's not a legal signature, I said. It's a doodle. You have nothing. Grant dropped the paper. His knees gave way, and he slumped onto the floor. He realized the trap had snapped shut. He had taken the money. The clock was ticking. And he had absolutely no way to build the project that would pay it back. I walked to the door. Marcus was waiting there, a small smile on his face. You're fired, Sylvia. Grant screamed from the floor, his voice cracking. Get out! I'll kill you. You can't fire me, Grant, I looked back over my shoulder. I quit. And by the way, you might want to call the police. Those loan sharks don't like it when people steal their money. I walked out of the office, the sound of Grant's wailing echoing behind me. It was the sweetest music I had ever heard. If you are still listening to this point, please help me by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below. It lets me know that you are amazing, and I understand that you are accompanying me throughout this journey. Your help is a huge encouragement, cheering me on. Please comment the number 1 so I can recognize you, and now, listen to me tell the rest of my story. When I returned to the estate that evening, the atmosphere had shifted from tense to apocalyptic. Grant hadn't come home yet, he was likely still in his office, frantically trying to find a loophole that didn't exist. But Krystal was there, and she was in a panic. She was in the living room, surrounded by open suitcases. She was shoving clothes, jewelry, and silverware into them. She looked like a rat sensing the ship was sinking. Going somewhere? I asked, leaning against the doorframe. I was back in my regular clothes, but I didn't feel like a maid anymore. I felt like the executioner. Krystal jumped, dropping a silver candelabra. You! Where have you been? Where is Grant? His credit cards, they're declining. I tried to buy a ticket to Paris, and it was declined. Grant is having a very bad day, I said. His accounts are frozen. The bank, and some very angry private investors, have put a lien on everything. What? Krystal shrieked. But he promised me. He said we were rich. He lied, I shrugged. Just like you lied about the baby. Krystal's eyes narrowed. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I think you do. The front door slammed open. Grant stormed in. He looked deranged. His tie was missing, his shirt was torn, and his eyes were bloodshot. He smelled of sweat and fear. Grant! Krystal ran to him. Grant, the cards aren't working. And this crazy woman is saying. Grant didn't say a word. He raised his hand and slapped Krystal across the face. The sound echoed through the cavernous hall like a gunshot. Krystal fell to the floor, clutching her cheek, stunned into silence. You useless parasite! Grant screamed, his voice raw. It's all gone. Because of you. I needed that land. I needed that project. Grant, baby, calm down, Krystal sobbed. We can fix this. We have the baby coming. Think of the heir. Grant laughed. It was a maniacal, broken sound. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled envelope. He threw it at her. Photos spilled out. The photos I had taken of the pills in her trash. And the copy of her medical file I had anonymously faxed to his office an hour ago, the one detailing her tubal ligation 3 years ago. The heir? Grant roared. You sterilized yourself in 2021. There is no baby. There never was a baby. You destroyed my marriage, you sent my wife to prison, for nothing. Krystal looked at the photos. She looked at me. She realized I had played her. I did it for us. Krystal stammered, scrambling backward as Grant advanced on her. And your mother? Eleanor knew. She helped me fake the records. She said she'd rather have a barren model than a low-class convict. Grant froze. My mother? She paid off the doctor. Krystal screamed, throwing Eleanor under the bus to save herself. She hated Sylvia. She told me to do whatever it took to get rid of her. Grant staggered back. The betrayal was absolute. His mistress. His mother. Everyone he had trusted had played him. And the one person who had actually been loyal, me, he had destroyed. He looked at me. I was standing calmly by the stairs, watching the implosion. Sylvia, he croaked. Sylvia, please. Tell me you didn't sign the land over. Tell me you can fix this. I'll kick her out. I'll give you anything. I looked at Krystal, weeping on the floor with her stolen silver. I looked at Grant, a broken man begging the wife he tortured. I can't fix it, Grant, I said. You signed the loan. You committed the fraud. The police are on their way. Marcus called them. Police? Grant's eyes widened. For the domestic abuse, I pointed to Krystal's bleeding lip. And for the wire fraud. And for the false testimony 2 years ago. We have the recording, Grant. The one from the bathroom. Recording? I pulled out my phone and pressed play. Krystal's voice filled the room. Pig blood, honey, theatrical genius. Grant looked at Krystal with pure murder in his eyes. But before he could move, sirens wailed in the distance. Blue and red lights flashed through the windows, illuminating the wreckage of their lives. You need to leave, Grant whispered to Krystal, his voice trembling. Get out. Before I kill you. Krystal scrambled up, grabbing her purse, and ran out the back door into the snow, abandoning her suitcases. She fled like the coward she was. Grant sank onto the stairs, putting his head in his hands. Sylvia, why? Because you took my son, I said. It was the first time I had said it out loud to him. Grant looked up, confused. What son? I was pregnant when you sent me to prison, I said, my voice breaking for the first time. I lost him in solitary confinement after Krystal's friends beat me. I flushed your son down a prison toilet, Grant. The color drained from his face completely. He opened his mouth to speak, to scream, but no sound came out. The horror of what he had done finally hit him. He hadn't just jailed his wife, he had killed his own child. The front door burst open. Police! Mr. Caldwell, put your hands where we can see them. I stepped aside as the officers rushed in. I watched them cuff Grant. He didn't resist. He just stared at me, weeping silently, a broken, empty man. I turned and walked away, heading toward the kitchen to make myself a cup of tea. The show was over. Now, it was time to clean up the mess. The arrest wasn't the end. It was just the opening act of the finale. Grant made bail the next morning. He used the last of his hidden cash reserves. He was delusional. He thought he could still spin this. He thought if he went ahead with the groundbreaking ceremony, he could bluff the bank and the public into believing everything was fine. He didn't know I had one last card to play. The groundbreaking was scheduled for noon at the cemetery site. A large tent had been erected. A podium was set up. Reporters from every major news outlet in Boston were there, hungry for a scandal after the news of his arrest broke. I arrived in a taxi. I was wearing black, not for mourning, but for judgment. I stood at the back of the crowd next to Marcus and Mr. Henderson. Grant took the stage. He looked terrible, pale, sweating, manic. But he smiled his famous charming smile. Ladies and gentlemen, he boomed into the microphone. Ignore the rumors. Caldwell Enterprises is stronger than ever. Today, we break ground on the Sanctuary, a resort that will redefine luxury. He signaled to the bulldozer waiting nearby. The engine roared to life. The driver began to move the massive blade toward the old iron fence of the cemetery. Toward my grandmother's grave. Stop! I shouted. My voice, amplified by a megaphone Marcus handed me, cut through the air. The crowd turned. Cameras swiveled toward me. That man is a liar and a thief, I declared, walking toward the stage. Security! Grant yelled. Get her out of here. She's a disgruntled employee. But the security guards didn't move. They hadn't been paid in weeks. They just watched. I climbed the steps of the stage. I stood next to Grant. I was smaller than him, but in that moment, I felt 10 feet tall. This land belongs to the Eternal Peace Trust, I announced to the cameras. I am the trustee. And I have not given permission for this construction. I held up the deed. Mr. Henderson stepped forward and handed copies to the front row of reporters. Furthermore, I continued, looking directly into the camera lens. Mr. Caldwell is currently under investigation for perjury and conspiracy. 2 years ago, he sent me to prison for a crime that never happened. Grant lunged for the microphone. She's crazy. She's an ex-con. Play it, Marcus, I said. Marcus connected my phone to the sound system. Krystal's voice boomed out over the speakers, loud and clear for all of Boston to hear. Pig blood, honey, theatrical genius. Dr. Eris has a gambling debt. The crowd gasped. A collective murmur of shock rippled through the tent. Grant froze. He looked at the speakers, then at the crowd. He saw the disgust on their faces. He saw the realization dawning on everyone: he wasn't a victim, he was a monster. Then, the recording continued. It was a part one hadn't played for Krystal. It was Grant's voice, captured by the bug I had planted in his office months ago. I don't care if the grave is there. Dig it up. Dump the bones in the river. I need that money. That was the nail in the coffin. The crowd erupted. People started shouting. Shame! Shame! Grant backed away, shaking his head. No, that's edited. That's fake. But it was too late. The illusion was shattered. From the side of the stage, two uniformed officers and a detective stepped forward. It was Detective Miller, the man investigating the fraud case. Grant Caldwell, Miller said, his voice grim. We're revoking your bail. We have new evidence of witness tampering and desecration of a gravesite. Grant tried to run. It was a pathetic attempt. He scrambled toward the back of the stage, tripping over a cable. He fell face first into the mud, the very mud he wanted to pave over. The officers were on him in seconds. They hauled him up, mud caking his expensive suit, handcuffs clicking shut. As they dragged him past me, he looked up. His eyes were wild, pleading. Sylvia, help me. I'm your husband. I looked down at him. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel hate. I just felt light. The weight of the last 3 years was gone. You're not my husband, Grant, I said loud enough for the microphones to catch. You're just a regret. I turned my back on him. I looked at the bulldozer driver. Turn it off, I commanded. The engine died. Silence fell over the cemetery. The wind rustled through the old oak trees, sounding like a sigh of relief from the ancestors sleeping beneath the earth. I walked down the steps to where Marcus was standing. He was smiling. We did it, he said. We did, I nodded. Now, take me to get a burger. I'm starving. We walked away, leaving Grant to the cameras and the cops. The image of him screaming in the mud would be on the front page of every paper tomorrow. And the headline would be, The Fall of the House of Caldwell. The collapse of Grant's empire was swift and brutal. It was like watching a controlled demolition. Once the banks realized the collateral was fake, they called in every loan. The private investors, the scary ones, stripped the company of its assets before the feds could even get there. Caldwell Enterprises filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy 2 days later. Liquidation. The estate, my house, was seized by the bank. It was put up for auction to pay off the creditors. I didn't go to the auction. I sent Mr. Henderson. I had the money now. Not just the small savings from my grandmother, but a substantial settlement. The state had overturned my conviction based on the new evidence. I was exonerated. And with exoneration came compensation for wrongful imprisonment. It wasn't a fortune, but combined with the fact that I was the primary creditor of Grant's estate, thanks to the unpaid divorce settlement and legal fees he owed me, I had leverage. Mr. Henderson called me at noon. It's yours, Sylvia. Pennies on the dollar. Nobody wanted to touch a house with that much bad press. I drove to the estate that afternoon. The gates were open. The grass was overgrown. The for sale sign was crooked. I walked up the steps and unlocked the front door with my own key. The house was empty. The bank had sold off the furniture, the art, the rugs. Even the curtains were gone. It echoed with emptiness. I walked through the foyer where Eleanor had spilled coffee on me. I walked through the dining room where Krystal had taunted me. I walked down to the basement where I had slept on a cot. It was just a house. A shell of brick and mortar. The ghosts were gone. I walked upstairs to the master bedroom. There was a stain on the carpet where Grant had dropped his wineglass the night of the gala. I stood by the window, looking out at the garden. My phone rang. It was the hospital. Ms. Sterling? This is Boston General. We have an Eleanor Caldwell here. She's been asking for you. I hesitated. I'm not family. You're listed as her emergency contact. Her son is unavailable. And the other woman, Krystal, hung up on us. I sighed. I'll be there. I found Eleanor in the stroke ward. She looked tiny in the hospital bed. The stroke she suffered when the assets were seized had left the left side of her face drooping. She couldn't speak clearly. When she saw me, her good eye widened. She tried to lift a hand, making a garbled sound. SSS. Sylvia, I finished for her. She nodded weakly. Tears leaked from her eyes. She looked at me with desperation. She wanted forgiveness. She wanted me to take her in. She wanted the daughter-in-law she had abused to save her from a lonely end in a state facility. I looked at the woman who had called me trash, who had kicked me when I was down. I brought you some socks, Eleanor, I said, placing a package on the table. And I paid for a private room for this week. But after that, you're going to Shady Pines. Social Services has arranged it. Her eyes filled with panic. She tried to grab my hand. I stepped back. I'm not your savior, Eleanor. I'm just the janitor, remember? I walked out of the room. I felt a twinge of guilt, but it was fleeting. She had made her bed. Now she had to lie in it. I returned to the empty house. I sat on the floor of the living room, eating takeout pizza with Marcus. What are you going to do with this place? Marcus asked, looking around at the vast, empty space. Live here? No, I shook my head. Too many memories. I'm going to bulldoze it. Marcus choked on his soda. What? Bulldoze a $5 million mansion? I'm going to tear it down, I smiled, looking at the ceiling. And on the land, I'm going to build a shelter. A transition home for women coming out of prison. Women who have nowhere to go. Women like I was. Marcus looked at me with awe. That's amazing, Sylvia. It's not charity, I said. It's justice. I'm going to turn Grant's monument to greed into a sanctuary for the people he despised. We sat there as the sun went down, planning the demolition. For the first time in years, the house felt warm. 3 months later, I received a letter. It was from the MCI Cedar Junction prison. Grant requested a visit. I debated throwing it away. But I needed closure. I needed to see him one last time, not as a victim, but as a free woman. The visiting room was loud and smelled of antiseptic and despair, a smell I knew too well. I sat behind the glass partition. Grant walked in. He was unrecognizable. His head was shaved. He had lost 30 pounds. His skin was sallow, and there was a bruise on his cheek. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a jittery, hunted look. He sat down and picked up the phone. Sylvia, his voice tinny through the receiver. You came. I came to say goodbye, Grant. Don't say that, he leaned forward, pressing his hand against the glass. You can help me. I know you have money now. You bought the house. You can hire a better lawyer. Appeal the sentence. Please. They hurt me in here. I can't survive this. You sentenced me to 2 years in a place just like this, I said calmly. You survived. I survived. But I'm innocent, he pleaded. I didn't know about the baby. Krystal lied to me. But you knew about the fraud, Grant. You knew you were stealing my land. You knew you were lying on the stand about seeing me push her. You saw an opportunity to trade an old wife for a new model, and you took it. Krystal gave you the gun, but you pulled the trigger. He slumped in his chair. I miss you, Sylvia. I miss us. I was happy with you. I was just weak. You weren't weak, Grant. You were cruel. Weakness is forgivable. Cruelty is not. I looked at him, searching for any lingering feeling. Love? Anger? Hate? There was nothing. He was just a stranger in an orange jumpsuit. A bad memory fading in the daylight. I'm pregnant, I lied. Grant's eyes widened. What? Is it Marcus's? It doesn't matter whose it is, I said. What matters is that this child will be loved. This child will never know a father who would sell him out for a resort. Sylvia, please. He began to cry, ugly, racking sobs. I have nothing. Everyone left me. Mom is gone. Krystal is gone. I'm all alone. You have your thoughts, Grant, I stood up. You have 10 years to think about every choice you made. Use the time wisely. Don't leave me, he screamed, slamming his fist against the glass. The guards stepped forward to restrain him. Sylvia! I love you. I love you. I hung up the phone. I turned my back on him. I walked toward the exit door. Behind me, I could hear him screaming my name, but the sound was muffled by the thick glass. I walked out into the sunlight. The air smelled of spring rain and wet asphalt. I took a deep breath. It was the sweetest breath I had ever taken. I was finally, truly free. Karma, I discovered, is not a vague cosmic force. It is a precise and brutal accountant. While I was building my shelter, news trickled in about the others. Krystal didn't make it to Paris. She didn't even make it out of the state. With her credit cards frozen and her reputation destroyed, she turned to the only asset she had left, her looks. But desperation ages a person fast. I saw her picture in the local paper 6 months later. It was in the police blotters section. She had been arrested in a Motel 6 on the outskirts of Lowell. Possession of methamphetamines and solicitation. The mugshot was shocking. Her hair was matted, her skin picked at and scabbed. Her eyes, once bright and mocking, were dead voids. She looked 50 years old. I read the article. She had tried to blackmail one of her clients, a local politician, claiming she was pregnant. He called the cops. It seemed Krystal only had one trick in her book, and it had finally backfired. She was facing 5 years. She would be going to the same prison I had just left. I wondered if Big T was still running the laundry. I hoped, for Krystal's sake, she wasn't. As for Eleanor, her fate was perhaps sadder because it was so quiet. She was in a state-run nursing home. It wasn't a dungeon, but it wasn't the Ritz. It smelled of boiled cabbage and bleach. I sent a nurse to check on her once a month, anonymously. The reports were always the same. She sat in her wheelchair by the window, staring at the parking lot, waiting for a son who would never come and a daughter-in-law she had driven away. She had spent her life judging people based on their status. Now, she was just a number in a file, fed by overworked staff who didn't care that she used to wear Chanel. One day, the nurse told me that Eleanor had mistaken her for me. She kept grabbing my hand, the nurse said. She kept saying, "Sylvia, the coffee. I'm sorry about the coffee. Please clean it up." She was trapped in that moment of cruelty forever. A prisoner of her own mind. I stopped the reports after that. I didn't need to know anymore. Their suffering didn't bring me joy. It just confirmed that the universe has a way of balancing the scales. They had built their castles on sand, and the tide had finally come in. The demolition of the Caldwell estate took 2 weeks. It was cathartic to watch the walls come down. The neighbors complained about the noise, but I sent them gift baskets of muffins, and they quieted down. In its place, we built the Phoenix House. It was a modern, light-filled sanctuary. There were no bars. No dark basements. Just open spaces, gardens, and therapy rooms. I hired Marcus to run the operations. He turned out to be brilliant when he wasn't being suppressed by Grant's ego. We worked side by side, late into the night, painting walls and assembling furniture. One evening, we were sitting on the floor of the new communal kitchen, eating Chinese takeout. "You know," Marcus said, playing with his chopsticks. "You never told me what you're going to do next. After this place opens." "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe travel. I've never seen the Grand Canyon." "I have a camper van," Marcus said, looking at me sideways. "It's not a Bentley, but it runs." I looked at him. He was kind. He was steady. He had seen me at my worst, scarred, angry, vengeful, and he hadn't run away. "Is that an offer?" I asked. "It's a suggestion," he smiled. A genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. I think you deserve to see something beautiful, Sylvia. You've seen enough ugly." I reached out and took his hand. It was warm and rough, a working man's hand. It didn't feel possessive like Grant's. It felt supportive. "Maybe," I said softly. "But first, I have one more thing to do." The next day, I drove out to the cemetery. The construction equipment was gone. The grass was growing back over the mud Grant had created. I walked to my grandmother's grave. I had replaced the simple stone with a beautiful marble monument. I planted a bed of purple irises, her favorite, around it. I knelt in the dirt. "Hi, Grandma," I whispered. I did it. I saved the land. I traced her name on the stone. Martha Sterling. Beloved mother and grandmother. "I wish you were here," I said, tears finally flowing freely. Not tears of pain, but of release. "I wish you could see the shelter. I think you'd like it." A gentle breeze rustled the trees. I felt a warmth on my shoulder, like a hand resting there. "I learned the lesson, Grandma," I said to the wind. "I learned that I am strong. I learned that I don't need a man to define me. And I learned that sometimes, you have to burn everything down to build something better." I sat there for a long time, watching the clouds drift across the blue sky. I felt light. The anger that had fueled me for 3 years was gone, burned up in the fire of my revenge. Now, there was just peace. And a future that was entirely mine to write. So, that is my story. It's not a fairy tale. There is no Prince Charming coming to save the day. The princess had to save herself, and she had to get her hands dirty to do it. I look at my scars in the mirror every morning. They are fading, turning from angry purple to silvery white. I don't hide them anymore. When I wear a swimsuit or a backless dress, I wear them with pride. They are my resume. They say, I survived. To the women listening to this, I know some of you are hurting. I know some of you are trapped in marriages that feel like prisons, or dealing with family members who treat you like you're invisible. I know the feeling of swallowing your voice until you feel like you're choking. But listen to me. You are stronger than you think. You have a wolf inside you, waiting to wake up. Don't let them convince you that you are weak. Don't let them convince you that you are crazy. Grant tried to bury me. He didn't know I was a seed. Today, the Phoenix house is full. I have 20 women living there. They are learning to code, to cook, to start businesses. We share our stories. We heal together. And Marcus? Well, we went to the Grand Canyon. It was beautiful. We're taking it slow. I'm not ready to get married again, maybe never. But it's nice to have someone who holds your hand just because he wants to hold your hand, not because he wants to own you. Life is messy. People will betray you. But the best revenge isn't destroying them. The best revenge is living a life so beautiful, so full of joy and purpose, that they become irrelevant. Grant is rotting in a cell, thinking about the past. I am standing in the sun, living for the future. Looking back at this turbulent journey, we realize that this isn't merely a story about revenge, it is a profound testament to the unyielding resilience of the human spirit. When life pushes you into the darkest corners, true victory lies not in bitterness, but in the courage to rebuild oneself from the ashes. Sylvia teaches us that our value is never defined by how others treat us, but by how we choose to stand up after we have been knocked down. This narrative serves as a powerful reminder that self-worth is non-negotiable. Sometimes, the most painful betrayals are actually liberations in disguise, clearing the path for a life that is authentically yours. It encourages us to set firm boundaries and understand that walking away from toxicity is the ultimate act of self-love. We hope this story has sparked a flame of courage within you. Please share your thoughts below, or simply comment good if you found these lessons valuable.